Hello, today I want to talk about parenting plans. I'm an attorney in Washington State. My name's Charlie Shane, and I'm excited to talk to you about this because I deal with it every day, all the time. So in Washington State, the court has several forms for divorce, and they try to make the forms so that it's easy to use for everybody, but it's still a mess. You can go to the Washington State Court website, and from there you can find forms. You just Google Washington State Courts family law forms, and they'll all be there. Now, with the parenting plan, and I say this ideally you want to come to an agreement on any case. It saves you money, there's less hostility, but a lot of times that doesn't work, hence the need for lawyers. But even when it does work, you want to make sure everything is done correctly, so there's still a need for us. Like I said, the forms, they're forms, but there's still enough nuances, complexity, that can be done on your own, but it's better to have a professional help you with those forms or prepare the forms so that they reflect your actual agreement. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, we're getting along, we have this wonderful agreement, we don't really need to worry too much about it. But that is not a good approach to take with parenting plans. The approach you want to take is, hey, we're getting along now, but what if I get a new partner and all of a sudden there are bad feelings coming from my ex? You want to do a parenting plan as if you're in a worst case scenario. And you need an enforceable document to make sure that your rights and their rights are covered. Also, it spells out everything so that there's no dispute over when you need to, there's no dispute over everybody's rights. So it's a good thing. So the first thing to talk about, and I'm just going to kind of go over some of the aspects in the form. One of the aspects of the form is on restrictions. And I'm not going to get too into restrictions because if you're asking for restrictions, you're asking for a fight. And most people aren't going to just agree to restrictions. Sometimes they will, though. Sometimes if there's a protection order and it's very clear that there's going to be domestic violence restrictions in the parenting plan, they'll agree. But generally, if you're seeking restrictions and you have to prove that the other side kind of meets the definition for those restrictions, then it's going to be a fight, and you're probably not going to come to an agreement regarding that. But you might. Just kind of depends on the situation. So on decision making, though, that's another aspect of this. Generally, the court is going to have joint decision making for medical decisions and for education decisions. But you can add all kinds of different things to this as well. Tattoos, even hairstyles, extracurricular activities. The sky's the limit there. So if you have a concern, or you can think about things that are going to be a concern to you as the children grow up or where they're at, then it's you can put those in the joint decisions, and it makes it so that the children can't just go do it, or the other parent can take them to do these things. It has to be a joint decision. Okay, so the next thing to consider is dispute resolution. Oh, also on the decision making, you can also make You can also agree to have sole decision making. For example, if one parent traditionally handles that and you don't really want to get involved and you trust the other parent in that aspect, then maybe you agree to sole decision making for that particular decision. But generally, I would advise that you have joint decision making on everything. Again, it goes back to that. You don't want to give away your rights, so make sure that they're spelled out in the parenting plan. Dispute resolution is the next thing. Generally, it's going to be mediation. There are local dispute resolution services that tend to be a little bit more affordable. I have found that these are only good for situations where you're very close, or you generally do get along, and maybe there's just a minor aspect of the plan that you guys kind of need a little help with. But if you really want if you don't get along, or you really want something that's really going to stick and you're going to have you want to increase the chances of getting to a good resolution, I would recommend a professional mediator. And I would also recommend that you have your attorneys involved. If it's a big matter, even so-called minor changes to parenting plans, these minor changes can be big things. And we're talking things like exchange points or decision-making, or you might want to consider a professional mediator. But also, if you have a high conflict type of relationship where you're constantly fighting over joint decision making, you're constantly fighting over things, I would recommend arbitration, because you can just resolve it without lawyers. You go to a professional arbitrator. You can a lot of times just do it via email. It's quick, it's easy, and it can readily resolve a lot of the things that pop up. And so those are some things to think about. I think in a different video, I'll talk a little bit more about different types of dispute resolution and when they're best. As far as the schedule goes, there are all kinds of schedules. You can look them up on the internet. I mentioned previously, a lot of times the courts are trending towards 50-50. They want each parent to spend as much time with the children as possible. If you do decide to go with the 50-50 plan, there's more than just week on, week off. There are all kinds of different schedules, and I think when the children are younger too, it's best that they don't go too long without seeing one parent or the other. As they get older, you can go with a little bit longer schedules. That's what I recommend. If one parent is typically not involved as much, every other weekend with like a midweek dinner visit on the off weeks, or even a midweek dinner visit on every week, so that they're never away from that parent too much. There's a wide variety of different plans you can agree to. The other thing you're going to be thinking about is the summer schedule. You can, if you don't have a 50-50 plan, maybe you want to have a 50-50 plan for the summer schedule, but at a minimum, I would recommend that it addresses vacations. Usually that's 1 to 2 weeks. Then you have the holiday schedule. One thing I recommend for the holiday schedule, especially for winter break, is that you just split winter break and you alternate who has which half of winter break, and you make it so that the transition point is never on Christmas Day, because sometimes the way the schedules are, it could be on Christmas Day. So I always just make sure that it's never on Christmas Day. And the party who has Thanksgiving typically gets the second half of winter break. Then the other section you will have is transportation. Where do you want to exchange the children? Do you want to exchange it at a midway point? Do you want to exchange it at each other's houses? Just kind of depends on your situation. You also have the other section. Now, the other section is kind of fun because there you can put all the weird stuff that you want to put. I like to put things like make sure that each party has their own residential. Each party knows the other party's residential address, phone number, contact information, that sort of thing. This is where you put non-disparagement clauses. And by weird stuff, I mean everybody has certain weird things sometimes they like to add. Like maybe you don't introduce your kids to a significant other for a certain period of time. I don't always agree with those, but I'll do what my client wants. I sort of have a boilerplate list of other things that I like to put in there. You also want to consider things like passports. What about, you want to spell out each party can attend events, and if we're doing joint decision making, sometimes I like to put different points about joint decision making in here. You can really spell things out, and you can get kind of creative there. So it's important and something to think about. When you hire a lawyer, typically they will have their own sort of set of things that they like to put in there for their clients. And then it has a place for specific findings of facts. I generally don't use that. If we have to go to trial, there's a separate finding of fact. Sometimes, though, if there are limitations, you want to put those findings in there so it's right there in the plan and everybody knows, hey, this person has limitations because of these specific reasons. And that way, in the future, if there's going to be a change, the court can look and say, oh, okay, I see why these restrictions were put in there. But in any event, I've just kind of went over briefly the different sections, the major sections of a parenting plan, things that you're going to need to think about when putting together a parenting plan. I hope this was helpful. Have a great day. Until next time. Thank you.